Discover how a poor girl's kindness transforms the life of the CEO's mother everyone rejected. Ella stood at the window of her small, run-down apartment, watching the world outside with weary eyes. In the heart of the Midwestern town, the golden hues of the sunset painted the buildings in warmth, but Ella felt only the chill of her reality. Every day was a grind, filled with taking care of her single mother and the endless challenges that came with living in poverty. Yet Ella's spirit flickered with ember-like determination. She dreamed of escaping this life, yet each time she closed her eyes, the weight of hopelessness pressed down like a heavy blanket. While most kids her age chased after fleeting trends, Ella found solace in helping her neighbors, offering a glimmer of kindness that seemed lost in the chaos of modern life. But everything changed one fateful afternoon when she crossed paths with Margaret. The elderly woman's long gray hair and weary eyes told stories of abandonment, a pariah in their neighborhood thanks to her ruthless son, a CEO known for his heartless reputation. Ella felt an unsettling tug of empathy, the kind that ignited a fire in her belly. Their friendship blossomed through shared stories and laughter amidst the backdrop of sadness. Ella learned so much from Margaret: integrity, loyalty, family love, all the things that her son seemed to have forgotten. But as their bond deepened, Ella also felt the pangs of her own dreams stretching further than she expected. School began to feel more like a sanctuary, her grades improved, and visions of a brighter future flickered in her mind. Yet, in the depths of her heart, doubt began to creep in. Then came the thunderous news: Margaret's son planned to demolish Ella's home to make way for luxury condos. The news rattled Ella's world, shaking her to the core. This wasn't just a project, it was the very foundation of her existence, a threat to her childhood memories and the bittersweet community she held dear. Faced with this betrayal, Ella felt a suffocating weight. Torn between her friendship with Margaret and outrage against the man who threatened to uproot her life, Ella's resolve intensified. The emotions intertwined like vines, anger towards the son and deepening compassion for the mother. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every passing day, Ella prepared for the upcoming community meeting where she would confront the CEO directly, her breath growing shorter as anxiety set in. Each time her thoughts drifted to his dismissive smile, her stomach twisted with dread. She envisioned the moment they'd lock eyes. She could hear the gasps from the crowd as she stood before him, shaking with fury but also with vulnerability. Would he dismiss her? Would the world see his cowardice? Ella felt on the edge, her heart racing, muscles tense, as she readied herself to expose truths buried under layers of fear. All the while, Margaret's presence weighed heavily on her mind. Would revealing the truth about Margaret's son further push them apart? The feeling of betrayal mingled with the hope for justice wrestling within Ella like a tempest waiting to spill over. As she prepared to speak, the room fell silent, and the fear of rejection loomed large. Would this confrontation be the moment that changed everything, or would it simply add to her burdens? As the air thickened with anticipation and uncertainty, one truth remained: they all stood at a crossroads, waiting for the chance to reclaim their lives and their voices. Ella stepped into the community center, the familiar scent of stale coffee and polished wood flooding her senses. The room was a shell of restless energy, filled with the murmurs of anxious neighbors. They were all here because, like her, they had something to lose. As she maneuvered her way through the throng, she felt invisible, the weight of her uncertainty threatening to pull her down. Taking a deep breath, she recalled the moments shared with Margaret, the stories of resilience, the laughter that punctuated their sorrow. This was not merely about her home, it was about Margaret's dignity, the integrity of their bond. The thought of betraying that trust urged her on, igniting a desperate determination within. Yet, the shadows of doubt clawed at her resolve. What if no one listened? What if they all turned against her? Ella rubbed her palms together, feeling the slickness of sweat. She needed to remember who she was. She had kindness as her armor and pure intention as her weapon. She felt a flicker of Margaret's voice echoing in her mind, advice stitched with wisdom and understanding. As the CEO strolled in, the atmosphere shifted. His very presence seemed to suck the air from the room. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, he held an imperious aura that commanded attention. Ella watched as the room quieted down, all eyes fixated on him rather than the woman whose home he intended to dismantle. The applause he received almost pierced her heart. What had she done? Her plan felt foolish now, a feeble act against a titan. But then she recalled Margaret's stories. That could be her voice, too strong and unwavering against the tides of indifference. She promised herself that she'd fight for what was right, not just for herself, but for Margaret, the woman who extended kindness when everyone else had walked away. With every tick of the clock, the tension thickened. Then, it was her moment. Rick, the community leader, called her name. Heart pounding, Ella strode to the front, her knees trembling slightly. The crowd shifted, their eyes darting to her with mild curiosity. Had they expected her? Did they believe she'd falter? She could feel their judgment bearing down on her. Good evening, everyone, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. I know I'm not your typical speaker, but I'm here to talk about the loss of more than a home. She glanced at the CEO, his bored expression igniting her anger. This isn't just about bricks and mortar, it's about a community that refused to forget the people living within it. It's about Margaret. Heads turned, whispers scattered through the crowd. She felt the stirrings of change. He's quick to overlook the people on the periphery, people who matter, she continued, leaning into the tension. Margaret's kindness has touched my life in ways I cannot measure. But you, sir, she pointed to him, her voice resonating with passion, have the power to sever those ties. To cast aside years of history in the name of profit. As she spoke, she felt the merge of fear and empowerment, a duality that pushed her to confront each word with conviction. The murmurs grew louder, curiosity morphing into concern. She could see the shift, people were leaning in, absorbing her words rather than dismissing them. But just as hope flared within her, the CEO's dismissive smirk returned. This is a business decision, young lady, he replied, voice laced with condescension. You can't expect emotion to prevail in matters of development. His words cut deep, igniting anxiety but also unwavering resolve as she glared at him. Maybe it's time that business decisions included the lives behind the numbers. Maybe it's time to bring humanity back into leadership. The crowd erupted into hushed applause, and her heart raced. Yet, the tension was palpable. She stepped into the arena but hadn't yet won the fight. It was now about not only unveiling her truth but also prompting others to stand beside her. Would the echoes of her defiance resonate beyond this moment? And if the CEO continued to shield himself in his quandaries, what lengths would she go to make sure he heard her? With every heartbeat, Ella understood she was finally rising from the shadows. Now it was crucial to see where that ascent led. The battle for her home had begun, but would it also ignite the battle for oneself? The applause enveloped Ella like a warm blanket, yet beneath its surface, anxiety pulsed through her veins. She had voiced her truth, but the encounter with the CEO weighed heavily on her mind. She felt his indifference to her pain, a wall built of arrogance and profit that seemed impenetrable. With her heart still racing, she stepped away from the podium, needing to reclaim her breath. As she forced her way back through the crowd, people's eyes shifted toward her, their expressions a mix of admiration and uncertainty. Did they believe in her cause? Did they sense the battle inside her? Her muscles screamed for release while her mind spun in circles. The applause still echoed, but the fight loomed larger, lingering in the periphery. Ella turned and caught sight of the CEO as he spoke with Rick, a casual smile dancing on his lips, as if the turmoil she had just stirred meant nothing to him. At that moment, a thought struck her, sharp and unwavering. He held a position of power, but she wielded something else entirely. The chance to harness stories, the human element that could shatter the cold veneer of corporate logic. As she exited the room, determination coursed through her. She wouldn't merely be a footnote in a story of loss, she would become a narrator of resilience. Alone in her car, with the engine idling silently, she reflected on how to shape the narrative moving forward. One tiny conversation could challenge that titan. The next day, as she sat at her modest kitchen table surrounded by textbooks and borrowed notebooks, she pondered how to approach Margaret's family and friends for their stories. Each life in the community was a thread that could weave a tapestry rich with emotion, bridging the gap the CEO had created with his sterile business acumen. She reached for her phone, hesitating only a moment before dialing Margaret's son, David. Memories of family dinners and warm laughter flooded her mind. It felt reassuring and terrifying all at once. "Ella?" David's voice emerged from the line, laced with curiosity. "David, it's me. I need your help. I have an idea that could change the narrative about your mother and our homes." His silence confirmed her intuition. David needed to be part of this. Together, they could forge a path larger than themselves, a powerful reminder of the value in community narratives. She could see the spark of interest growing in him now, and a wave of relief rolled over her. The next weeks unfolded like a series of little events that chipped away at her self-doubt. Guided by the passion to elevate Margaret's story and the stories of others, she organized small meetings. Each meeting felt like stepping into a new role: an advocate. The drive to collect stories transformed her from a woman bound by fear to a formidable presence fueled by purpose and passion. With each shared tale, she discovered nuances of her own voice, an empowering shift that bolstered her confidence. In a conversation with the local newspaper editor, she found another opportunity to amplify their collective voice. It was risky, but she felt a rhythm building, a wave of momentum that had eluded her in earlier moments of paralysis. Each published article would act as a stone thrown into the pond, rippling out to reach even the boardroom of the CEO. Adjusting to this growth, however, wasn't without growing pains. Some days she felt overwhelmed, wondering if the effort could truly amount to anything tangible. Each time self-doubt crept into her mind, she would think of Margaret and the strength in her community. Her empathy, which once felt like a weight, was transforming into her greatest asset. Yet, certainty was still a distant dream. As one of David's stories made its way into a local blog, a response from the CEO rolled in, a sharply worded rebuttal claiming that heartfelt emotions have no place in real estate. It ignited fury inside her, but she realized this backlash could also be an avenue for dialogue. She sensed the ultimatum lurking just beyond the horizon. What she didn't know was how far they could push back. With every story, every word, she felt herself preparing for a confrontation that would test everything she had become. As the pieces fell into place and the stakes climbed higher, she braced herself for the inevitable moment where she would have to face the CEO, unfiltered and unyielding. Would this confrontation finally unveil the humanity behind corporate pretense, and reveal her true power? With steely resolve, Ella stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dressed in a simple blouse and blazer, her outward appearance was unassuming, yet inside she felt a maelstrom of thoughts swirling, anticipation mixed with dread. She received confirmation of a meeting with the CEO's team. This assembly promised not just confrontation but a chance to present the stories she had been curating. Each voice she amplified would serve as her armor against the fortified walls of corporate indifference. Her phone buzzed beside her, breaking the trance. It was a message from David, urging her to remember the purpose behind their efforts. "We're not just fighting for Margaret. We're fighting for the truth." She took a deep breath, letting his words wash over her. They were true and reminded her of the journey ahead. On the drive to the office, she practiced her speech, each word carefully chosen, igniting fire in her belly. Memory flashed before her eyes: Margaret's warm smile, David's earnestness, the community rallying behind their cause. These images fueled her belief. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a chance to lay bare the crux of her argument, a challenge to the CEO's rigid worldview. Upon arrival, the building loomed large and intimidating. The sleek glass facade reflected the urban hustle, a stark reminder of the corporate world's cold efficiency. Ella took a moment to center herself, clutching the folder containing the stories and testimonials she'd gathered. This would be her shield. As she entered the conference room, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The CEO's team, a lineup of sharp suits and straight faces, scrutinized her as she took her seat at the head of the table. They exuded a quiet confidence, but Ella quickly reminded herself of the power she held in her narrative. "Thank you for meeting with me," she started, her voice steady. "I know you've dismissed emotional stories as irrelevant, but these narratives are what make our community whole. They offer a truth that numbers and graphs cannot encapsulate." The CEO's assistant raised an eyebrow, but she pressed on. She launched into her presentation, weaving together the tales from Margaret's family and others impacted by the recent decisions. With each story, the room shifted subtly, some members leaned in while others scribbled notes. Her words were not just data points, they painted vivid images of lives intertwined, filled with struggles and triumphs. Suddenly, the CEO's voice sliced through her momentum. "While I appreciate your passion, this is business. Emotion doesn't pay the bills or drive profits." His tone was dismissive, yet Ella could see it now, the cracks beginning to form in his confidence. Ella felt the heat rise within her, but she couldn't falter. And yet, without understanding the people behind the statistics, doesn't our vision become myopic? She paused, letting her question resonate. A business built on the backs of individuals has a moral obligation to uphold their dignity. You have an opportunity here to show that compassion can coexist with profit. The room fell silent, and she sensed a shift in the dynamics. She wasn't merely defending her position, she was asserting the truth buried beneath corporate facades. As she concluded, she felt a swell of courage, invigorated by her own conviction. However, the CEO leaned back with a smirk. "You're naive if you think we can change the business model. But I commend your enthusiasm." His dismissive tone made her heart race, an unsettling realization dawning: this would not be easily swayed. She had drawn the battle lines, but he was unyielding. The meeting wrapped up with a polite exchange of niceties, but Ella wasn't finished. As she left, she turned to her team, her resolve hardening. They would not back down. Failure wasn't an option, the stakes were too high. Driving home that day, adrenaline coursed through her. She had unearthed a truth, but the confrontation was far from over. As the glow of dusk painted the streets with hues of orange, she knew the next move lay in galvanizing support, ensuring they were not just a voice in the void. The cynicism of the corporate titan loomed larger than ever, yet Ella was ready to confront it head-on. Faced with the reality of her journey, she now must decide just how far she was willing to push for change. Would she be prepared for the sacrifices this fight demanded? The thought echoed loud in her mind: this was only the beginning. The moment of truth would arrive again, and she would have to dig deeper than she ever imagined possible. Could she rally enough strength to push through the barriers they faced, or would she be silenced once more? The preparation for the real battle had only just begun. The next morning, Ella awoke with newfound clarity. The soft light filtered through her curtains, a silent promise of opportunity. She could feel the weight of yesterday's meeting still pressing down, but instead of fear, it ignited a fire within. A resolute determination had woven itself into her very being. This was no longer just about Margaret or the others, it was about redefining the narrative itself. In the calm of her kitchen, she sipped her coffee, considering her next steps. What could turn the hardened CEO, a fortress built on profit margins and quarterly projections, into a listener? Ella understood she wouldn't win the battle simply by presenting more stories. She needed to craft an approach that bypassed the fortified walls he had erected around his heart. Her mind raced through possibilities, an outline forming as she began jotting down notes. Empowered by her vision, she envisioned a community-driven initiative that invited participation from employees themselves, perhaps an internal campaign that spotlighted personal anecdotes from their lives. This could create a deeper connection to the human experiences behind each statistic, a compelling counterpoint to the CEO's cold logic. Before diving headlong into planning, however, Ella knew the importance of research. She recalled snippets of the CEO's interviews that had aired over the years. He often remarked on his mother's sacrifices, her struggle as a single parent. A sliver of a plan began to twist in Ella's mind. Was the CEO's aloofness a shield against vulnerability? If he could be softened by the very stories he sought to dismiss, she might just stir empathy where there had been indifference. As she prepared to meet with David and her colleagues, she felt a slight tremor of apprehension. What if they didn't share her conviction? Would they see the perspective she was developing as a viable strategy? These doubts flickered like shadows in her mind, but she pushed them aside. The pulse of conviction beat stronger than ever, a testament to her resolve to transform fear into strategy. Gathering her team in a nearby cafe, she initiated the conversation with tempered enthusiasm. "I think we need to pivot our approach," she began, gauging their expressions. "What if we created a series of narratives, an internal project that emphasizes our common humanity?" David leaned forward, his brows knitted. "Are you suggesting we get the employees to share their stories? That might hit home." Others nodded slowly, their initial skepticism giving way to curiosity. Ella's heart quickened. "Exactly. We could create short video testimonials, employee spotlights. Stories that connect their personal experiences to our mission and values. It has to come from them, though. Authenticity is crucial." The discussion thrived, buzzing with energy as her team began fleshing out ideas. Each voice contributed to the tapestry of hope that was beginning to weave itself together. This was transformative. She was witnessing a shift from mere confrontation to collaboration. However, a small voice of doubt whispered insidiously in the back of her mind. Could the CEO be swayed? Would he genuinely open to hearing voices he had so easily brushed aside? As elevation of hope surged, the undercurrent of fear threatened to pull her back. Hours later, with a plan taking shape, Ella felt a rush of pride mixed with anxiety. She was creating a path forward, yet the unknown loomed large. Her mind teetered on the precipice of possibility and peril. Facing the CEO again would be a test not just of her resolve, but of her nascent idea's worth. The drive back home ignited a sense of urgency in her. A new phase awaited, one that would require her to confront her insecurities directly. What if she failed? Would the weight of responsibility crush her newfound resolve? The wheels of determination turned in her mind, racing toward what lay ahead. Uncertainty became a companion on this journey, and Ella steeled herself for what would come next. Would she rise to the challenge and unleash her proposal amid the impending storm, or would she falter in the face of an unyielding corporate climate? The time had approached to sift through her fears. The echoes of doubt would not prevail this time. With every fiber of her being, she felt it was time to mobilize not just her team, but her passion. She was ready for a confrontation that could redefine her relationship with the corporate titan. As Ella parked her car, she caught her breath. Clutching her notes, she whispered to herself, "It's now or never." With the flicker of hope igniting her spirit, she stepped into the unknown, prepared to take on the formidable challenge that awaited. The boardroom felt colder than usual as Ella walked in, her heart pounding a steady rhythm of fear and determination. She was not merely a participant today, she was an orchestrator of change, and she would have to mobilize her best qualities to face the kind of scrutiny typically reserved for executives. The CEO sat at the head of the table, flanked by members of the board who had built their careers on numbers and market dominance, their faces blank canvases reflecting little more than skepticism. "Thank you for joining, Ella," the CEO said, his voice steady, a mixture of curiosity and a hint of impatience. With a deep breath, Ella began. "I've been working on a proposal that I believe can reshape our internal narrative. It's about accountability, shared experiences to drive community and connection." As she spoke, she noticed the tiny flicker in his gaze. It was as if, for a brief moment, his walls shifted slightly. She outlined her vision, describing the project that would showcase personal stories from employees, linking them to the company's mission and values. Her voice grew stronger. "Each narrative has the potential to emphasize our shared humanity, bridging the gap between personal struggle and professional achievement." Crossing her arms in an unconscious protective gesture, Ella continued. While she scanned the room for feedback, she caught David's encouraging nod from the corner, a silent affirmation fueling her resolve. But she couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. What if all her passion fell flat against the firm and unyielding corporate expectations? "Interesting concept, Ella," the CEO finally interjected, his cold demeanor still apparent. "But how do you expect us to reconcile such personal storytelling with profit margins? Employees come here to work, not to share their life stories." Each word hit her like ice shards. She ardently sought to maintain composure, yet fears surged. Did he truly believe that the heartfelt connections she envisioned were irrelevant in the boardroom? Leaning forward, she said, "Though profit is fundamental, we must see that behind every statistic lies a person, an individual with experiences that enrich not just our workplace but our corporate identity. Wouldn't it be catastrophic to overlook that?" A ripple of unease passed through the room. The board members exchanged glances, and she sensed a churning tension. She was challenging established convictions. "I appreciate your sentiment, but can you provide data that illustrates how this will impact our bottom line?" He retorted, his eyes narrowing slightly, testing her resolve. The urgency of the situation electrified Ella, and suddenly, a memory flickered to life, one of her mother's unwavering hope in the face of adversity. Ella couldn't ignore the strength born from vulnerability. She needed to show him not just numbers but the emotional resonance that fueled motivation. "What if your mother's story was an entry point?" Ella proposed. She spoke of the CEO's reflections on his mother's sacrifices that had resonated in past interviews. His attempts at distance now became a connection she hoped to forge. The boardroom fell silent, and she dared to glance at him. The steeliness in his expression softened slightly, as if he was reflecting on something deeper than business. "Let us say," she pressed on, feeling the urgency to seize the moment, "we could invite employees to share threads of their struggles in relation to the company's journey. You might find it highlights values that resonate with your own upbringing. Would that not mean something?" The atmosphere shifted, an electric charge, as the CEO paused, contemplating her proposal. He looked around the table, observing the reactions of his team. A few were leaning in, intrigued. Did she actually reach beyond the rigid boundary he had constructed? If she could challenge the narrative that defined their corporate culture, did she possess the capability to transform how they, as a company, viewed their own humanity? As the moment stretched, uncertainty mingled with the lingering hope she felt. It wasn't a clear path, but a tiny opening began to emerge. It was a crack in the walls of indifference. With her pulse racing, Ella leaned back slightly, casting a watchful gaze on the CEO. Would he take the leap into this transformative narrative? Would her understanding of human experiences be acknowledged as it deserved? The boardroom felt like a battleground, and she braced herself for his response. The echoes of the past resonated heavily, carrying with them the question that loomed unspoken. Would the CEO finally hear the voices he had chosen to overlook, or would he remain anchored to his beliefs, a prisoner of corporate logic? As the silence thickened, Ella realized, this would be a defining moment of convergence or divergence. The truth awaited, and with it, a crucial juncture that could not only impact her career but could perhaps reshape the entire organization. Would she uncover hidden strengths that could influence not just the present, but their future? Fear bubbled beneath her determination as the never-ending cycle of corporate resistance loomed large, but she steeled herself. Today was not just a meeting. It was the moment where her passion could redefine everything. Ella held her breath as the minutes dragged on, every second amplifying the tension that coiled around her like a tight noose. She found herself questioning everything: the strength of her proposal, the significance of vulnerability in a sterile corporate environment, and her own ability to maintain composure under scrutiny. Finally, the CEO broke the silence, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully before him. "You're asking for a significant shift in perspective," he said, his tone somewhat softer but still laden with challenge. "What makes you think the employees will be willing to share these experiences? It might open wounds they're not ready to confront." Ella registered the hint of concern in his voice, using it to temper her own anxiety. Perhaps he was more receptive than he initially appeared. She replied, "The beauty of storytelling lies in its cathartic nature. When employees feel safe and heard, it can catalyze immense personal and professional growth. This isn't just about sharing pain, it's about healing and empowerment in alignment with our goals." More board members exchanged glances, the air in the room thickening with possibility. She could sense that she was making headway, the steel facade beginning to crack. It was just the kind of delicate moment that could dictate her future. But doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve. Was her vision, rooted in authenticity, enough to pull the executives from their ingrained skepticism? The CEO continued, "All right. Let us say we concede to this concept. Do you have a plan in place? We need to quantify success, some metrics to gauge effectiveness." She felt the weight of that question press heavily on her mind. Her heart raced, but this was the moment she had been preparing for. This was where she had to evolve, not just as a professional but as a visionary. "I envision a phased approach. We begin with small, intimate focus groups where employees can share their stories within a trusted environment. The feedback we receive can be systematically analyzed and presented to highlight shifts in engagement and satisfaction levels over time." Some nods from the board gave her reassurance, but she noticed the CEO's eyes narrow again. "Are you genuinely confident this will engage employees? What if they feel exploited? We don't want a PR disaster on our hands." A moment of vulnerability fluttered through her, and she realized that her own fears mirrored his. This project wasn't merely a professional challenge, it was personal, rooted in a profound desire to foster connection. Drawing courage from this realization, she said, "This will only work if we foster a culture of trust from the top down. If we show our team that we value their stories, that we see them as whole individuals, then they'll meet us halfway." The CEO considered this, a brooding look crossing his face. The tension was palpable, each board member's expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. In that electrifying moment, Ella recognized that she wasn't just trying to convince them in a way, she was inviting them into a future that required humility and vulnerability, qualities rarely acknowledged in their high-stakes environment. "What would it take for you to believe in this, to champion it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pulse of uncertainty. The question hung in the air, challenging him not just to evaluate her proposal but to explore the deeper implications of opening up to new ideas. All eyes were on him, and in that silence, Ella held her breath, a blend of hope and fear surging through her. What would he reveal in his next words? Would he acknowledge the potential for change that lay in their shared humanity, or would he lean back into the comfort of numbers and logic? The crossroads approached swiftly, and at that moment, she understood, this conversation would determine not just her future, but also the spirit of the workplace moving forward. "Ella," the CEO said slowly, his voice laden with contemplation. "I need more than just anecdotes. I need proof. We can't afford to gamble on this." The recognition that she was standing on the precipice of something huge thrilled her, but it also scared her to the core. Would she be able to provide the data he was asking for? It was time for her wounds and failures to take shape into a tangible plan. Ella set her jaw, an ember of determination flickering within her. Facing upfront challenges, her next steps would require her to gather the voices she aimed to elevate, to show proof of concept through real-life impact. Would she have the courage to seek deeply into her colleagues' lives for the metrics that would speak loudly, or would she retreat into safety? As thoughts and strategies collided in her mind, she realized the stakes of this moment had crossed a threshold. No matter the outcome, she was witnessing a transformation not just in her approach but in herself. The path ahead seemed daunting, but it was one she was ready to navigate. The true test awaited just around the corner. With a deep breath, she waited, wondering how far this would take her, how drastically her voice would turn the tide within the establishment. What lay ahead could redefine not only her role but the essence of the entire organization. Would courage and authenticity prevail, or would corporate rigidity overshadow her vision? The silence that followed was full of unspoken possibilities, urging her to step boldly into the unfolding narrative. Ella poured herself into her work in the subsequent weeks, transforming her uncertainty into focused determination. The room that had once felt suffocating now buzzed with the energy of a developing vision. Each day brought fresh insights as she crafted a strategy that balanced quantitative data with the qualitative stories she longed to elicit from her colleagues. She devised surveys, created templates for group discussions, and planned to collect information that spoke to both emotional and professional growth. Yet, as she dove deeper into this project, the gravity of the task weighed on her. It wasn't just data she sought, it was authenticity, real stories that could humanize the workplace, and she feared the fragility of those experiences. How could she approach those she hardly knew? How could she extract personal narratives without feeling like she was prying into their lives? These questions haunted her. She decided to lead by example. One afternoon, she gathered her courage and sent an email inviting her team for an informal lunch. In the message, she shared her intentions, explaining how she envisioned their stories bringing transformation, providing a glimpse into the vulnerability she was asking them to embrace. To her surprise, responses flowed in, some eager, others hesitant. As the day of the lunch approached, she spent hours mapping out her own story, assessing the vulnerabilities she had once feared to expose. The moments in her past, the trials and tribulations that shaped her as a leader became vivid in her recollection. With each reflection, she found strength, invigorated by the idea that her narrative could serve as the crucial bridge toward connections with her team. The lunch proved to be more than just a gathering, it was a revelation. As Ella shared her experiences, the room filled with palpable energy. Slowly, others began to share their own stories, some moments of triumph, others of struggle. There were laughter and tears, confessions that had long been locked away, and an undeniable sense of camaraderie began to form. But as the conversations deepened, the realization struck her, not everyone was willing to open up. There were still barriers, echoes of skepticism and conditioning that held certain individuals back. This pushed her to confront her own fears of rejection as she reached out to those who remained quiet during the lunch. One particular colleague, Martin, stood out in her mind. A hard-nosed analyst known for his critical thinking and avoidance of emotional discussions, he had remained a silent observer. The next day, finding the courage to extend a personal invitation, she approached him. "You know, Martin, I really appreciated having you there. I value your perspective. Would you be open to sharing your thoughts on our initiative?" There was a moment of hesitation before he looked at her, skepticism etched on his features. "Ella, I think a lot of this is fluff. We need results, not feelings. What proof do you have that this will work?" Her heart sank momentarily, but his challenge ignited something within her. "That's exactly what I'm trying to discover," she replied, meeting his gaze firmly. "I want to understand how to create an environment where feelings translate to results. We're not just machines. We're people who perform better when we're connected. If we do this right, we could redefine metrics." His expression softened, revealing a flicker of recognition for her perspective. "You're asking for a lot, you know that, right?" he said, a hint of defiance hanging in the air. "I know," she said quietly, yet resolutely. "But what if it works? What if we find that connection drives productivity, innovation, and loyalty? Isn't it worth exploring? In that exchange, Ella found herself sharpening her own values. She was not only an advocate for the employees' well-being but now also an agent of change who needed to confront resistance head-on. Each small victory made her more resolute, proving her belief that vulnerability could lead to strength was not just an abstract ideal, it was becoming her reality. As days turned into weeks, successes were mirrored by setbacks. Some employees responded enthusiastically, while others felt overwhelmed by the prospect of sharing deeply. Ella experienced the raw spectrum of human emotion. Her project teetered on the edge of potential collapse and burgeoning success. At one moment, during an impromptu meeting with her supervisor, she felt a jolt of inspiration. She could implement a feedback loop system that allowed employees to voice concerns about their stories being shared, a safe space within the initiative. This thought brought her clarity, and she resolved to move forward with this refinement. Yet even in her momentum, a haunting thought nagged at her: would the CEO trust her now? All eyes were on her as the team prepared for the next presentation, a crucial juncture that could affirm or dismantle everything. The weight of anticipation pressed heavily upon her shoulders. And then came the fateful day, when all efforts would converge, and she would step before the board again, pitching not merely the project but the very essence of vulnerability that she hoped to intertwine within the company culture. Would she summon the strength to galvanize their support, or would she expose the rawness of her journey, risking rejection once again? As she stood outside the boardroom, preparing to enter, she felt a surge of doubt. Would she truly be able to share the authentic narrative she had crafted, and would it resonate? The moment of truth awaited her. Stepping into the boardroom, Ella's breath caught in her throat. The polished table, a vast and imposing surface, mirrored the apprehension in her heart. She took a moment to observe the faces of the board members, each a grim sentinel of judgment, encased in their tailored suits, awaiting her every word. This wasn't merely a presentation, it was a culmination of her journey, a declaration of her vision, and an indecipherable leap of faith. She began with her own story, the one she had painstakingly crafted during her reflections. As she spoke, layers she had seldom shared began to unfurl. Memories of her humble beginnings spilled forth, revealing how compassion and human connectivity had guided her path. The sincerity in her voice struck a chord, transforming skepticism into intrigue. She realized this was not just a narrative, it was her medicine, working to bridge the gap between her and the board members. Imagine a workplace, she pressed, her voice steadying as confidence surfaced, where stories empower us, where we don't just clock in and out, but build a community. Where vulnerability is not seen as a weakness but as a strength. Ella observed subtle shifts in expressions as she painted a picture of interconnectedness, the humanness of the workplace yielding emotional currency that could redefine productivity. But Martin's skepticism loomed large in the recesses of her mind. What about him? Would he remain resolutely resistant, arms crossed against any ideal that didn't benefit the numbers? As she wrapped up her proposal, she invited questions, feeling the tension in the air thicken. Silence hung, a heavy leaden pause, before one of the board members spoke. If we are promoting sharing emotions, how do we ensure accountability remains at the core of our operations? How do we prevent this from diluting our success? A sensible question, yet it rattled her for a moment. Here lay the crux of her challenge. The duality of human experience, emotions and performance needed a thoughtful response. She had anticipated questions of practicality, but this one caused her to dig deeper into her resolve. What if we monitor qualitative measures, such as employee satisfaction and engagement levels? She proposed, tapping into her analytical side while remaining true to her vision. Pairing these metrics with our traditional financial assessments could illustrate the bond between emotional health and improved results. As she spoke, she felt the fire of determination encompass her. She was not merely defending her concept, she was reshaping perceptions around productivity and success. And as her projection of confidence intensified, she caught a glance from Martin. For the first time, he looked invested, engaged, potentially wrestling with his own doubts about the initiative. Then, relishing this small victory, her eyes flicked around the room. It was clear that some had shifted from skepticism to curiosity. There was alignment forming, one heartbeat at a time, and it fueled her to dive deeper. Ultimately, Ella continued, this initiative is about cultivating a sanctuary for creativity, collaboration, and authenticity. It's not just about how we feel, but how we convert those feelings into powerful outcomes. Isn't it worth the risk? A palpable energy coursed through the room, a subtle but undeniable shift that hinted at possibilities. Yet, she sensed a remaining unease, a familiar adversary in the form of doubt. After her compelling pitch, would it be enough to cleanse the boardroom air of disbelief? Would they embrace the transformative potential she had painted, or would her vision collapse under the weight of scrutiny? As the floor opened for further questioning, a hush fell over the board members. The pivotal moment loomed ahead, a precipice from which her hopes could either soar or plummet. Was she truly ready for this revolution she envisioned? Then, amidst the mounting silence, another voice spoke, breaking the tension. But what if it fails? What if this isn't just a leap of faith, but an embarrassing misstep for the company? The question sent a shooting tremor through her resolve. This was the reckoning moment, one that could sway her journey irreversibly. Ella squared her shoulders, feeling the weight of her purpose against the thrust of uncertainty. The path before her started to unfold, revealing shadows of her own fears. What if she wasn't enough? What if the vulnerability she advocated was indeed her undoing? This challenge, this very essence of doubt, surged within her, a wrestling match between despair and hope. The decision teetered on the edge, to confront that fear or retreat into a familiar shell. The room waited, suspended in time, and all that remained was her next breath, a catalyst for action or an invitation to slip back into silence. What would she choose? In that charged silence, Ella stood at the crossroads of her fears and her triumphs. Drawing strength from her reflection in the polished boardroom table, she recalled all the lives interwoven with her journey, particularly Margaret's, whose strength coursed through her veins like fire. She took a step forward, her voice firm with conviction. If we never take risks, then where do we go? Staying in the shadows of caution has never created change. This initiative isn't just about vulnerability, it's about understanding our essence as human beings in a workspace dominated by metrics. The room was electric, the board members now on the edge of their seats, uncertainty breaking like dawn over the horizon. The question posed was not just a challenge, it was an opportunity. She continued, powerful alongside her resolve, I can't promise perfection, but I can promise effort, connection, and a chance to redefine what success looks like when we embrace each other as humanity. The CEO's brow furrowed as he processed her words, his well-crafted facade beginning to waver. Ella leaned into that moment, sensing a shift. She had taken the plunge, now, she had to trust in the collective worth of their experiences. What if we framed success through stories? She asked, an idea crystallizing. We measure our wins by the engagement we receive and the satisfaction levels reported by employees. Let us partner traditional metrics with these human experiences. Ella felt a surge of empowerment, every word propelled her forward, every heartbeat stoked her fire. The tension thickening in the room began a metamorphosis from skepticism to consideration. One by one, the board members began to nod, intrigued by this fresh perspective. The hesitation of disbelief was dissipating like steam in the sunlight. The whispers began to stir, encouraging something new to take root within the corporate behemoth. Ella approached the finishing line with an authentic call to action. Let us forge a commitment to this initiative. I believe in its potential to reveal hidden talents, cultivate a collaborative spirit, and elevate our corporate culture. Together, we have this transformational opportunity to turn the tide. The responses flowed like an invigorating stream, the CEO's eyes meeting hers once more. Sensitive narratives can live alongside hard data, he finally confessed, vulnerability threading through his structured demeanor. Initiatives must be evaluated not just on reviews but on the connections created. Let us explore how we can implement this. And in that moment, Ella understood, the anticipated confrontation had transformed into collaboration. She felt a rush of satisfaction, the taste of hard-earned victory washing over her consciousness. Acceptance and recognition from the board signified far more than professional achievement. It underscored her growth from a quiet girl burdened by her circumstances into a confident advocate for change. Weeks later, the initiative was birthed within the company, gaining traction with each shared story, replete with testimonials that emphasized the human factor in the corporate landscape. The employees, initially tentative, reveled in their newfound voice. After months, the metrics began to reflect a positive shift. Engagement scores climbed within the community, evidence that humanity indeed drove productivity. As the dust settled after the initial implementation, Ella felt a stirring sense of fulfillment as she navigated her role as a leader. She went from advocating change to embodying it, transforming her understanding of success into something palpable, resilient, and connected. The accolades began to follow. The CEO commended her for her pivotal contributions, and recognition from peers blossomed, solidifying her competence within the corporate ladder. Fulfilled and confident, Ella stood before her community, a facilitator of dialogue and growth. The transformation was complete. She had forged her own narrative and redefined her reality through empathy and action. With a firm grasp on her maternal influence and the lessons of kindness instilled by Margaret, she knew this was just the beginning. Ella smiled, standing proudly within the company she had invigorated with purpose. With her heart full, she whispered a silent thank you to the journey that brought her here, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. It was time to share her story. Now, if you felt the powerful transformation of Ella's journey, you need to subscribe now to stay connected with these incredible stories of personal triumph. This is the moment to show your support by leaving a like now, to keep the algorithm thriving. Comment below with what resonated most with you and your theories about what's next. And most importantly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need a boost of inspiration in their lives. Don't wait even one more second to spread the power of transformation.